Former Democratic Congressman Beto O'Rourke of El Paso, thank you so much, and welcome back to Eye on Politics.
Thank you, Jack. Great to be with you.
Nice to see you. So you have been making the rounds lately. You've been crisscrossing the state. You've done 8 town halls. You've done a number of interviews with reporters. It certainly seems and maybe feels like you're gearing up to run for office in 2026. Would that be for U.S. Senate, for governor, lieutenant governor, attorney general? A lot of statewide positions open.
This moment's bigger than a political office or a campaign or any person, certainly myself included. There are a lot of folks, Jack, in Texas who are really hurting right now. They're being hurt by this administration, whether it's cuts to the VA or proposed cuts to Medicaid or Social Security, or turning away loaded trucks from the food bank in Amarillo. So the thing to do right now is to show up for one another and bring people together regardless of party affiliation, Democrats, Republicans, independents. As you mentioned, we're doing it in Wichita Falls, in Denton. We were in Garland on Monday night, but we're going everywhere to show up and be with everyone. And I really think there's power in bringing people together right now. Folks need to know that we're not isolated, that we're not alone, that we're not as divided as they want us to be. And if we come together, we're going to be able to overcome these challenges. And then, yes, down the road, but it's far away, 2026 or 2028, we're going to see really strong candidates arise who can replace this cruelty and corruption and incompetence with leadership that really serves everybody.
And let me ask you a question because I totally hear what you're saying as far as the purpose of what your town halls are. But at the same time, people know you. And, you have said at the very first interview you did, you were asked if you were going to run for U.S. Senate. You said no. And then at the Denton rally or town hall, you were asked by a member of the crowd, are you going to run for U.S. Senate? And you said, and let me make sure I get this right, you told the crowd that you would run for U.S. Senate if the people of Texas want. What does that mean?
It means that if I am the right person to run for that seat, if I can do the most good for the people of Texas by actually winning and being able to serve them in that position of public trust, then that's something I should certainly look at. But I don't know. Well, I do know that I'm nowhere close to understanding the answer to those questions. And I don't think anyone can really, unless they've gone out and listened to and been with and worked alongside the people that they want to serve and represent. And so, Jack, for me, I'm pretty open to any role that's going to be useful. That could be a candidate. It could be continuing to run Powered by People, which is registering hundreds of thousands of voters across the state of Texas. It could be getting behind great people who are running for these really important positions across the state, from school board to U.S. Senate and everything in between. So I just want to be useful and helpful because this is a real moment of truth for the country. And I don't want to just be sitting around waiting and wondering if someone's going to step up. And for me, stepping up is being out there, being with people, and bringing them together to take action to get our country back.
And most people who do that, though, do it to run for office to make a difference.
That's true. But I'll tell you, in 2024, my name was not on the ballot. I didn't run for an office, but I was out there nonetheless. And I was actually doing much the same work that I'm doing right now, holding town halls, showing up on college campuses, supporting candidates, registering people to vote, staying in touch with those newly registered voters to turn them out to vote. So each of us has to find a way to do everything we can with what we have where we are. One of the things that I can bring to the mix is I can pull people together. More than 1,000 people joined us at the Garland Convention Center on a Monday night. And those are folks, some of whom voted for Trump, some voted for Kamala Harris, some didn't vote at all, but all of them care about what's happening to this country right now. And they want to be able to listen to one another, and then they want to be able to take action, volunteer, register people to vote, get behind candidates, maybe run for office themselves, who knows? But I really believe this moment calls for action. So, Jack, that's why I'm out there. If I just were to stay here at home in El Paso, I would go crazy because of what's happening to this state and this country. And I need to act. I need to move. And that sentiment is shared by hundreds of thousands, millions of my fellow Texans. They want to do what it's going to take to make sure that we get our country back. And this is my one small contribution to that.
So what criteria and what factors will you use to determine whether you should run for an office?
It's I don't have a spreadsheet or a list or a set of data points that I'm going to be looking at, but I really, and I mean this as genuinely and honestly as I can, and I hope this is coming across. I just want to be useful and I want to be helpful. I want to be able to look my kids in the eye and say, hey, when all this was going down in America in 2025, here's everything I did to make sure that your future and the future of your kids and their kids was secured, that we were able to pass on the last best hope of Earth to the generations that follow ours. And I'm well aware that, I've run for races and I've won them for US Congress 3 times. I've run for races and I've lost them. And in some of those cases, even though we lost, we helped people down ballot do great things. And I'm well aware that there have been years where I've been helpful, where my name hasn't been on the ballot at all. So I'm looking at all of those different scenarios. And I guess, Jack, as I continue to listen to people, which is the most important thing I think I can do, and travel the state, that will be incredibly clarifying for the path that I pursue. And I'm really agnostic as to what that looks like. I don't need to be a candidate. I don't need to hold office, but I do need to help Texas and this country at this moment of truth. And I'm going to do everything I possibly can. And I'm taking nothing off the table.
And so as far as like when you look at whether to run, I know US Senate has often been mentioned, right? And you've talked about that with the crowd in Denton, for example. Are you ruling out like running again against Governor Abbott? Are you ruling out running for lieutenant governor? Are you ruling out running for attorney general, those state offices? And would you, if you do run, are you looking at US Senate as a possibility?
I'm not ruling anything out, but I'm also not really thinking about an office or a position or a title or a campaign or a candidacy. I do think, Jack, to answer the spirit of your question, we those of us who want to see Texas and this country do better, we need to mount very serious campaigns with really strong candidates at every position on the ballot. So all of those that you just mentioned, but every state Senate seat, every state representative seat, every congressional seat. These town halls that I've held in Wichita Falls and Denton and Amarillo, those are all represented by Ronnie Jackson, who didn't even have a competitor on the ballot in 2024. And therefore, that explains why he hasn't held a single town hall meeting to be held accountable, to answer questions, to be able to serve and deliver for his constituents. That's not on Ronnie Jackson so much as it is on the Democratic Party not fielding a candidate to force that accountability, to offer that choice, and to make sure that there's really someone better who can serve and represent and reflect the values of that district and those communities. So, all the way up and down the ballot. And one of the things that I hope to be able to contribute to, Jack, in this year is helping to recruit and encourage people who should be running for office, especially folks who've never been in politics before, the retired sheriff's deputy, the volleyball coach, the high school math teacher, the folks who've been in unelected positions of trust, who should be able to step up and serve at an even higher level of public service going forward. So I acknowledge the need for us to have strong candidates. I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that we do. Whether I'm one of them, I don't know. I just don't know.
Have you had any conversations with former Congressman Colin Allred, who has also said he is seriously considering running for US Senate? And if he were to get into that race, is that something where you could technically decide, I'm going to also throw my hat in the ring? Are you looking for a Democratic primary, for example?
I've talked to Colin a few times, talked to him right after the November election just to thank him for stepping up in this way. Talked to him at Cecile Richards' funeral service in Austin. And then we spoke by phone in the last couple of weeks. And I think he's in a similar position in that this guy just really wants to serve and wants to deliver for Texas and for this country. And so I just wished him well in his decision-making process. We agreed that we would love to keep the channels of communication open. And look, I supported him very strongly in his Senate run last time. I'd love to see Colin continue to be in a position of public service. Whatever he chooses to do, run for, not run for, I'm a fan of his. And look, the list doesn't stop there. If you look just at North Texas, if you look at Clay Jenkins, if you look at Jasmine Crockett, if you look at people who are already in positions of power and they're actually doing something with that and they're delivering for people, we are so lucky. Expand it beyond North Texas. You've got James Tallarico, you've got Andy Brown, you've got Greg Casar, you've got Christian Menifee in Southeast Texas. We really have an extraordinary bench of talented people. I want to encourage as many of them as possible to get out there and put their names on the ballot. And I believe if we have a united ticket and we're fighting on every single front in every one of the 254 counties and forcing Republicans, especially the office holders, to defend on every single part of that line of battle, we have a much better chance of breaking through. If it's just one person, and we're putting everything behind that one person. I've been in that place before. I don't know that that's enough after 30 years in the political wilderness for Democrats. We really have to do something bigger, bolder, different, well-funded, and again, on every single front with the highest possible caliber of candidate that we can possibly field.
Let me ask you, because in listening to what you're having to say, it sounds a lot like, what a Texas Democratic Party chair, like I've spoken with Kendall Scudder, and that's something that he would say. He wants to grow the party in the state of Texas. You could have run for that. You chose not to. And so that's why I think a lot of people are looking to you to see if you're going to run for office, because a Democratic Party chair's job is to recruit and is to get out all these, as many Democratic candidates to run against Republicans, as you just mentioned. But when you're holding town halls, you see, it's a different level. It for a lot of people, it cries, I'm interested in running for office. And can you understand why people think that?
Absolutely. Especially because I've held office and I've run for office before. I think the additional point, Jack, that I'm trying to make is that I've also spent a lot of time on the ground, not as a candidate, not running for office, for, ever since the governor's race, which ended in November of 22. I've still been out there. I have been traveling, crisscrossing the state, holding town hall meetings, being at rallies, supporting candidates, registering people to vote, showing up on college campuses in the hot Texas sun, and introducing myself to unregistered, likely future voters, getting them on the rolls, and then staying in touch with them. And I'm inspired to do that work because there's so many other volunteers who are out there doing the exact same thing, unheralded, unsung. Their names aren't in the paper. They're not going to be interviewed by Jack Fink on TV, but they're out there doing it. And it would be perhaps understandable or easy for me to sit back and say, hey, I've done my piece. I've been out there as a candidate. We left home for a bunch of years to travel and meet the people of Texas. Now we'll just step back and let other people do it. And if perhaps if it were any other year, any other moment in American history, maybe I could be satisfied with that. But there is no way I could live with myself given what is going on, how many people who are being hurt in Texas right now, given the fact that we might very well lose what Lincoln calls the last best of hope, the government of, by, and for the people, a democracy, ruled by law instead of by kings and tyrants. I mean, all of that is being decided. The question is being called for America. And so I'm not alone. I mean, the folks who organize and show up at these protests and marches, who are holding their own empty chair town halls, regardless of whether, Beto O'Rourke or some other person that is well known is showing up. These are my heroes, and their example is the one that I'm following right now. And I'm trying to do my part. And so, I understand that some people may say, hey, I've seen this guy run before. He's running again. But they may also say, hey, I've seen this guy before when he wasn't running, and it looks like he's doing much the same thing as he was in 2023 and 2024. I think there's just a lot more scrutiny now, understandably, because we're approaching a real pivotal midterm, perhaps not unlike the midterm that we faced in 2018 after Trump was elected the first time, and we faced some of these serious, significant threats. So that's why, Jack, for me, nothing's off the table. I will do everything I possibly can, and I won't exclude anything from that mix. But as to whether I'm going to be a candidate or not right now, there's just no way for me to answer that at this point. I'm going to just continue to do what I know is helpful and useful, registering people to vote, bringing people together, and encouraging them to take action.
How do you size up the Republican primary for U.S. Senate, where obviously Senator Cornyn is facing a challenge on the Republican side from Attorney General Ken Paxton, and perhaps Houston area Congressman Wesley Hunt may jump in at some point. So, what do you make of that race?
I think it's very favorable for Democrats because of John Cornyn, who is incredibly unpopular within his own party and across the state, and not necessarily because he's a bad guy, but more to the fact that no one understands what he really believes in, what he stands for, whether or not this guy has a moral compass. He was against Trump before he was for Trump, and now he's tripping over himself to try to get to the right of Ken Paxton or closer to the president than anyone else in Texas. I don't know how believable that is. With Ken Paxton, you have somebody who was twice indicted, impeached by a Republican majority in the state House, nearly convicted in the state Senate. I don't know if it would have been different if Dan Patrick, the lieutenant governor, had not taken so many hundreds of thousands of dollars from campaign donors who were in Ken Paxton's corner. We'll never probably know, but it certainly stinks. And this guy was also under active FBI investigation. To add to that, he was helping to lead the rally on January 6, 2021, just down the street from the Capitol, the so-called Stop the Steal rally that incited insurrection and violence. We lost Capitol police officers as a result. And for the first time since 1812, the citadel of our democracy, the U.S. Capitol, was invaded. He has a hand in that. He is antithetical to the values of Texas and this country. He's wildly popular in the most extreme fringe of the Republican Party, and that may be enough to win him the nomination, but that leaves the field wide open to a strong Democratic contender who can show that they are going to deliver for the people of Texas. Republican, Democrat, independent, doesn't matter. They're going to get it done. I think Ken Paxton's only going to serve the most extreme element. John Cornyn is only going to serve himself. So I like that matchup, even though we don't necessarily have a candidate yet. And we should remember it's early. The filing deadline is in December of this year. Plenty of time for great people to emerge.
And, regarding Attorney General Paxton, I went back and checked. And in 2022, when all these allegations were swirling around him, he still obviously won the primary, and he still won the general election by nearly 800,000 votes. So, that's a lot of votes. I mean, are you calling the entire Republican Party who voted for him and those extra nearly 800,000 votes extremists, or does this just reflect the fact that people decided he is the best candidate for the state in that moment of time?
I think there's a lot in the mix. I think, again, very popular within the extreme element of the Republican Party, which is dominant, unfortunately, in today's Republican Party. In 22, you had every single Democrat swimming upstream politically against President Biden, who was in office, who unfortunately had very low favorability in the state of Texas and was not in some areas meeting the needs that Texans were demanding. You also have the most voter suppressive, voter intimidating state in the country. It's harder to register or cast a ballot in Texas than it is anywhere else. And you therefore saw more than 9 million registered eligible Texans not even vote, given the fact that those indictments and that FBI investigation were on the ballot, or that Uvalde was on the ballot, or that the most extreme abortion ban in America was on the ballot, or least insured state in the country was on the ballot. I don't think it is that Texans don't care about those issues. I don't think that they're extremist in their nature. I've visited them in every one of the 254 counties, and I can attest that they're not extremist. But I do think that when we are something less than a free and fair voting state, when we put so many obstacles in the place of people, and when you have I don't know if it's 4-1 or 5-1 money advantage on one side versus the other side, you can begin to explain something that otherwise would be inexplicable. How do these radical extremists who are hurting Texans so badly continue to win office? And that's why, Jack, to one of your earlier questions, I said, if Democrats run the same playbook, if all the eggs are in one basket, if it's just one candidate who's supposed to break through, I don't know that we'll get there no matter how favorable the conditions. But if you really have a broad, united front with high caliber candidates who are well funded at every position on the ballot, that's statewide, congressional, all the way down to justice of the peace, then I think you're cooking with gas. And I saw that in 2018. And I was frankly the beneficiary of that. Our campaign that we ran certainly helped down ballot candidates. And I've got to think, Colin Allred, who ran a fantastic campaign against Pete Sessions, a well-funded, entrenched Republican incumbent. I mean, he won that race on his own right in 2018, but it didn't hurt that there was a lot of energy at the top of the ticket. Well, by that same token, the energy that Colin Allred generated in his district in North Texas helped all of us who are running statewide. And that flowed all the way down to the state House seats, where you had 12 insurgent Democrats defeat 12 incumbent Republican members of the state legislature. So I'm a big believer in that because I have seen it work. And so, again, some of these questions about whether I'm going to run or anybody else is going to run, they may even be beside the point. We need a lot of people to run, and we need those who are running to be serious, to be well funded, and to have a credible shot of winning those seats. I think if we do that, Jack, many of these millions of voters will overcome those obstacles, that suppression, and they'll find a way to get out there and vote because they will believe in their hearts that it's possible. But they have to see something different. And I think it's incumbent upon Democrats to provide that in this next cycle.
Isn't that called a winning message, right? Because you talked about all the people who stay home. Isn't that an indictment on the Democrats not coming up with a winning message?
I think Democrats shoulder much of the blame for losses in 2024. Certainly, Donald Trump is an unprecedented candidate and is a master of communicating along the mediums that are most popular right now. We've never seen anybody like that. We may never see anybody like that. But, the electorate was screaming for change. And Democrats really did not offer that in 2024, at least in the way that voters wanted. And it's in part why I think you've got to have the kind of ticket that I just described, which no one has seen in Texas, or at least not in living memory. It's been decades since we've seen a ticket like that. And to your point about the message, any Democrat who promises that they've got the message right now, I don't think can necessarily be believed. I think the message will come from the people. And I know that from visiting all of these counties, holding all these town hall meetings, listening to all these people who are being deeply and badly hurt right now by those in power. What they want to know from us is that we're going to fight for them. The challenge, Jack, with a message like that we're going to fight for you, is it's not one that you can say, it's one that you have to show. And when Democrats fail to show up, when they don't go down to the Rio Grande Valley, when they take DeSoto for granted, because DeSoto has always voted for the Democratic Party. So let's not show up there. We're going to go chase the suburban soccer mom in Collin or Denton County. Well, she's important, but so is the person in DeSoto. And you can say anything you want. You can have the best focus group tested message in the world that polls at 100%. But if you do not deliver it in person, and if it is not reflective of what you've heard in DeSoto and Collin County and Denton County, as you listen to the people that you want to serve, then you're just not going to win. That, at least, is my theory of the case. I know there's plenty of smart people who strongly and vigorously disagree with me, and they say, hey, Beto, this will be won on money and messaging and over the airwaves. And yes, those things are important, but politics at the end of the day is people. Democracy is about government of, by, and for the people. And if you're not with the people, I don't blame the people for not voting for you. So my belief is that we've got to be there with them, fight right alongside them. And from that, you will see the message, you will feel the message, and folks will vote accordingly.
Former Democratic Congressman Beto O'Rourke from El Paso, thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Jack.